Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, a specific Q&A episode. I forgot if this was the fifth or the sixth one. Maybe it's the sixth one. I'm sorry. I should probably know this in advance, but I don't. Anyway, though, welcome back to another one of these. Thank you for sending in your questions. Looking forward to talking about a wide variety of topics here, talking about roster construction, player confidence, some ups and downs when it comes to coaching and a couple other things. So this will be fun. Excited to be receiving those questions. So be on the lookout when these episodes come on the way, when we're looking for questions, and make sure that if you didn't get your question in, make sure that you get it in the next time we do one of these. As always, I do not do this alone. I am very happy to be joined once again by Coach Gliebe. Coach, thanks again for joining us here. How are things?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good. Winding down school, and then summer basketball will start. So
one ends and another starts right away, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was thinking about this with a Twitter poll question that we had a couple weekends ago, and I'm gonna spring this on you. I asked about how long do coaches spend on their post-game speech? And so I'm curious for you, when you were playing in college, two parts to this question. Did your coach spend a lot of time talking to you after the game? And secondly, more importantly, were you even listening?
Well, to answer the second part of that question, probably not, because I can't exactly remember. But no, I think he did. Road games were probably a little shorter just because we'd have to shower and then, get on the road to get back home. Home games, maybe he did talk a little bit longer. I don't think he was ever super long-winded unless it was, just a really, really bad game. Yeah, I don't think he was ever super long-winded.
And the reason I ask is because I know that coaches say all the time, like, stop talking so much after a game. Nobody's listening to you anyway. Everyone's completely checked out. They're not going to learn anything from it. And so I think each year my speech, quote unquote, is just gets shorter and shorter. Like, I'm at the point of like, all right, 2 sentences. It's more like relaying information they need to know the next day, more than like anything else that we need to go on. Because I don't know. We're all just like, all right, we're done. And I think that's helped me, because I know, and I don't know if you've been in that boat before, where like after a game, especially after a loss, like I'm like feeling a certain type of way emotionally, and I'm like spewing off the handle, and I'm gonna say like stuff that like isn't coherent or like well thought out. So it's probably better for me too that like I just say a couple things and then we all just go on. So all right, sure. Cool. All right, so there's kind of 2 parts to this question, and thanks, John. I think it's Stanzik that sent this in, Lake Travis High School out in Texas. He asked, in a perfect world, how would you organize your non-varsity teams to best maximize your program's development? So I know that there was a little bit more to that question, where he was asking specifically, Coach, about, is there a certain number that you want to keep like on your freshman team or on your JV team? What kind of goes into your thought process about how many you want on those lower levels?
Well, for us right now, we're honestly, and even coming in as we're looking at numbers going into next season, we're kind of struggling to even potentially even be able to field a JV team. I don't really know, maybe back in previous years they had enough for a freshman team, but we don't have enough for freshman teams. And a lot of schools locally don't. And you'd be surprised too, just being like, Indiana, like kind of like the mecca of basketball. We don't have, there's a lot of schools locally that don't even have JV teams. They just don't have the numbers. So ideally I would say I would say try, if in a perfect world, 8 to 10, and you're able to then, have 2 or 3, maybe 4 of those girls, sit with varsity as well. And for me, with the struggle of numbers, I try not to cut unless it's just, we just really don't have the time to work with this person, or, if they're behaviorally or academically ineligible or whatever. Um, we try really not to cut people just because of our numbers situation.
And has that been like declining over the years? Has it always kind of like been that way since you've been there at your school? Or
Yeah, I mean, so my first year we had a JV and varsity.
yeah.
My second year we ended up having to cancel our JV season like midway through, just because we had girls getting hurt, quitting, whatever. And then this past year we actually had 16 girls, 17 girls. So we were able to have a JV and a varsity, but we graduate 5, and yeah, it's just, you just kind of see that happening across the board with just people losing numbers.
Yeah, it is. I know here it's kind of a struggle and it's kind of a
Yeah.
fight. First off, I know in my area, being out in Phoenix, soccer is huge here, and soccer and basketball run concurrently here because it's a winter
Yeah.
sport. Because soccer
Okay.
can be done in the winter here,
Yeah.
so you're fighting that. I know that you got the whole club volleyball thing, and I know
Yeah.
that's been killer. And so, we've been fortunate enough that we've kept 3 teams: a freshman, a JV, and a varsity team. But a lot of the um teams specifically within our region don't have like a freshman team, and some don't have a freshman or JV team. So we get the whole fun of like trying to like basically reschedule and find a season
Yeah.
for all of our girls, and it's a whole thing, but usually it works out, which is nice. But to answer the question, I think like freshman level, I want a lot. Like I don't even mind up to like 15, honestly, because I feel that they might make a team, but I don't know if they're going to know if basketball is something they really like or if it's really for them until they actually start going through a season. And I
Yeah.
think you're going to start, if you have like 15, at least all the times that we've had a lot of high numbers at the freshman level, I feel like we've weeded out kids. I don't know if that's a good verb to use, but I think our roster, I think as the year has gone on,
Yeah.
when we start with 15, we're down to like 9 or 10 at the end. And so I'd rather do that than start with 9 or 10, maybe lose a couple, and then it's like, oh, now we have like 6. So I don't mind that. It does make it a little tricky if you have like all 15 who kind of stick with it in the beginning, because then I know playing time becomes like a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I don't mind. It gives them a chance to kind of really compete with each other, like you really got to fight for minutes if there's 15 of
Yeah.
them out there, and you'll see who wants it and who doesn't. JV JV's always kind of tricky because, and I don't know if you had this situation or not. Like I used to think that like I wanted, maybe up to like 12 on JV and whatnot, but I've kind of found over the years that JV is kind of like you get like this small nucleus of like true JV players, and then you just kind of have like some freshmen who might play like a couple quarters with you, or some guys on varsity who might play a couple quarters. You kind
Yeah.
of like piece together a team out of it. Um, I think it's difficult to have like 12 solid like JV players when, as a head coach, you might want some of your, bench guys to get minutes there, or maybe a freshman or whatever is ready to get moved up. And that's tricky for me. I don't know if you have an ideal JV number or not, or if you would kind of do the same thing ideally and kind of like piece it together from other teams.
Yeah, I mean, like this year, I think we had 8 or 9 JV players. And then we would dress on varsity 2 or 3. They weren't always getting a ton of minutes with varsity, but it was kind of like their reward for, working
Hmm.
hard and playing hard, to, be participating with varsity stuff. So yeah, I mean, I would like to keep between 8 and 10 if possible, just like I said, struggling with numbers, unfortunately we don't have the luxury to be having a lot of moving pieces and stuff. So we really don't cut. I mean, really try not to cut a lot, just because we need them.
Yeah, and then there's probably a lot of, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but maybe it is for like those players then to like stay eligible, right? And to like keep it together and hopefully not have any injuries or anything like that. Cause like
Right.
you lose at one or two of them and all of a sudden like everything's in really, really tough shape.
Yeah.
Um, I think the hardest thing for me on the JV level is when I don't know if you've ever had seasons like this, but I have in the past and witnessed it where you have like a lot of juniors on JV. And
Hmm.
that's always tough because then it's like sometimes it's hard to know like what their place is. You know, you have
Yeah.
some people who are juniors and then you're trying to figure out like where they're going to fit in as seniors and are they going to get a lot of minutes and that's always a tough battle, which is actually the second part to his question, which was stance on keeping seniors that aren't necessarily going to help on court production, but they have an impact on culture. And how would you manage that roster construction to avoid discontent from guys or girls that go several games in a row without getting into the game? I seem to recall, Coach, that you had a player that kind of fit this description, and we may have talked about this before. Am I right?
Yeah.
That you
Yeah.
did? Okay. Well, no, I know it's in the archives somewhere, but what was the situation of that player? And it was a big culture girl, right? Who got some minutes eventually.
Yeah. And honestly, yeah, and even this year, talking about juniors on JV and how they're going to
Hmm.
fit in as seniors, we actually have that situation as well as we go into next season. I think if they're going to impact your culture in a positive way, then, you know, I think first off, you just have to be very upfront with what you expect their role to be. Um,
Hmm.
and we put a really big emphasis on the out of season stuff, which I'm sure every coach does. And some of the kids that don't um put anything in the off season, it just kind of correlates to how they perform in season. So we just kind of let them know like this is your role. As far as getting to play, it's just going to kind of be dependent on if you get better in the off season or what you're going to put into that. If they have a negative impact on the culture, then goodbye.
Yeah.
I mean, you just really can't have that. Yeah. I mean, just if they're, cause your seniors are kind of set the tone for your culture. And if
Hmm.
you have freshmen or sophomores coming in and those are the people that they kind of look up to, not that they have to always look up to seniors, it just kind of happens, and they aren't upholding your expectations and standards for your culture, then they got to go. I mean,
Yeah, you have to, and I think to your point of what you mentioned, like you really need to talk with them after their junior year, going into their senior year, especially the ones who you're just like, I don't know if you're going to see a lot of playing time. You got to lay it
yeah,
all out to them what they got to do in the summer.
yep,
I know I've had some tough conversations with some juniors before, and I was like, look, like you're not ready to be like
yeah,
playing varsity. Like I'm
yeah,
just telling you right now, I'm not saying you can't get ready or can't be ready, but you're not right now. And I
yep,
said, you got this summer and you're going to do with this summer whatever you're going to do with it and maybe that will give you that opportunity, but if you don't have a good culture in place, right, to your point, you may have juniors who just think, oh, I'm a senior now, like of course I'll be on varsity, of course I'm going to be playing a
yeah,
lot. And if you don't address that right away, like you gotta get a hold of that.
yeah,
In terms of like avoiding discontent, I think you lay it out to them after tryouts. And we've had conversations as a coaching staff with girls and we said, hey, like, what are you going to do if you don't play a few games in a row? Like, are
mm,
you gonna go and like complain to your parents? Are you gonna go like complain to somebody? Like, how are you gonna handle it? Like, put the situation out to them. And if
yeah,
they're gonna be upset about it, then just say, hey, like, thank you, but like, if that's gonna be the way you feel, just know then that we're probably not gonna be able to take you on this team,
yeah,
because that's gonna maybe potentially be what their reality is. And I don't know. I don't know if this is hmm, controversial or not, but I just think that you should be able to not with every player, but I just think if you really want to, you should be able to find a way to sneak a player in for like a minute, even if it's just a minute. Like I feel like there has to be like a way to like to kind of do that. Like if this player is that much of a liability on you that you can't even sneak him in for a minute during like every few games, I hope they're like the best culture practice person in
Yeah,
the absolute
right.
world, because
Right.
we faced that. We had a lot of seniors this past year, and we just try and find a way to just sneak them in for a minute, or look at your schedule and find your like winnable games, or maybe we've had some not so winnable games where we're like, we're kind of down 25 going into halftime. We
Yeah.
got a minute left. You know what, like, go in there. What's the
Yeah.
worst that's gonna happen? We're down
Right.
25 already.
Yeah.
um so yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think you should probably do. And um, do you have to have those conversations like a lot? I know you had a lot of seniors this past year. Were you having those
Mhm.
conversations with that sort of thing, where you had seniors that maybe weren't gonna get a lot of playing time, or did a lot of your seniors see the floor a lot this year?
Yeah, I mean, we had one senior that really the only reason she wanted to play was to stay in shape for softball, which was totally fine. She
Yeah.
played JV, and she would dress varsity, didn't get in varsity really ever, but she did play JV. Had another senior that again just played just for the heck of it. And I wish she would have played her other 3 years because she was actually decent.
Hmm.
Um, and we did try to play her as much as possible. Sometimes there were games where it was just like our five that are out there, or, we got a 6-man rotation that's just flowing. Everything was just kind of working. But, at the same time, again, like, I'm terrible at subbing, and I'll be the first to admit that. Like, that's what I always tell my assistant coaches. I'm like, you guys got to tell me when we need to get people in, because I'll just forget. And then, there was another senior, my two seniors, they were good. They played pretty much the entire game. Then I had another one. She just transferred this year.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah. She, struggled, in playing time. That was the one I was telling you about. Purest jump shooter, just,
Hmm.
work ethic and stuff in practice. And we did have multiple conversations like, this is what we're seeing in practice, and this is how you're performing in practice. This is what you need to change to get into the game. So that we can trust that, you're going to play hard and, not give up if your shot's not falling, just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. And I
So we
and
were
and I,
having those
and I
conversations.
think, like, I'm also thinking too, like, if you're I also think with your players who maybe aren't going to help with on-court production, they definitely should still be able to help with like defensive production. Like there
Mhm.
should be no reason why, like, if you want to like throw one of them out there like on your press or whatever, and maybe you don't want your best player out there like picking up like a cheap foul on a press or something like that.
Yeah.
Like throw somebody in there for 45 seconds and just say, hey, like, give this guy a quick break, go out there and run the press and things like that. Like that doesn't take a whole lot of
Right.
basketball knowledge. You need a little bit of knowledge on how to press and everything, but hopefully, like, again, I just don't think there should be a situation where you have guys or girls on your team who just like can't do anything for you. Like at that point, I don't know. I just think if you can't put them out there for like 30 seconds every couple games, like
Yeah.
I said, they better be the biggest like cultured, biggest like cheerleader type, I don't hype man, or I don't know. They better be the best at something there. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my thought. Um,
Yeah.
all right, so next question. I have players who lose confidence when their shot isn't falling. How do you build shooters' confidence, especially in a game situation? Um, Go ahead, coach. How do you build shooters' confidence when they start falling into a slump, or they're not feeling it?
So I kind of grew up with this mindset, like, you just got to keep shooting. And I don't ever yell at somebody for shooting. I might say like, hey, in this situation, probably don't want to take that shot. Here's what you should, like, maybe next time, maybe do this. But also, like, as a coach, like, it's your responsibility to put them in game situations in practice. If you're
Hmm.
not playing or practicing in a tempo that helps them get ready for game situations. And I think, part of that, maybe add in some more game-like situation drills, or even game situations where you're scrimmaging. We do a lot of game situation stuff, especially late in the season, where we'll play like 3-minute games, and we'll put different scores up in different situations. And two, it's also on the player. I tell my kids all the time, like, you have to be able to put yourself in a mind frame when you're shooting or doing a shooting drill where you're always thinking about a game. Like when you're ripping through and going to attack the basket, like you're ripping through on a defender. So that's something too. And I've struggled with my girls of like getting them to understand, like, you've also got to take some ownership. Maybe you need to stay after and get up 100 shots on the gun, or, something. But I definitely think, putting your players in game situations or game tempo is important, but then also like putting some of the ownership on them. Like, okay, well then what are you doing? If you're not working on shooting outside of practice, or you're, whatever, then how do you expect, I've had conversations with players like, why do you expect that to go in? And they're like, what? Like, why do you expect that shot to go in when you never shoot that shot in practice? When you never practice that. They were like, well, they can't answer it. So that's kind of my response to that question.
Did you ever go through that as a player? Did you ever go through a confidence slump at all, or no?
My high school coach was always really good about, like, I mean, I'm sure I did. But like my high school coach always kind of instilled in us like next play. So, if I missed a shot, then I needed to go get a steal or a rebound on defense. Or if I missed an outside shot, then it was always like, okay, you need to go hit a layup, get yourself going, and then work your way back out, just to kind of build up that confidence. So yeah, I just always had the next play mentality, and I try to tell my girls that, as well.
Yeah, just short-term memory, good or bad, right?
Yeah.
Short-term memory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm kind of the same mindset, like to agree with your point about like, well, okay, of these shots, like how many of them are you shooting on your own? In practice, like how many I'm thinking to myself, am I putting this player in a situation to get those shots up? I am not going to be the type of person to try and like fix somebody's shot during the season. I've never had any luck with that. I think that it just messes with players. They start thinking way too much about their shot, and they don't get enough time to really put in a lot of reps. A lot of them, if I try to talk about their footwork or something, and then like they're way overthinking it, and then they just kind of lose it. And I think like what I've tried to tell some of my girls who've been in that situation is essentially that you can lose you can lose a little confidence, and you can get like a little bit down, as long as you are still doing all of these other things that we need you to do on defense, or attacking the basket, or holding onto the ball, or making good passes and good decision making. Like if you got all of that, like you're still working hard and you're achieving that, shots will come. Like the shot that you just keep shooting, and everything else will work itself out. What I try to pay attention to is whether or not that lack of confidence then starts to lead to like other things that they aren't doing. That's when I'm gonna have an issue. And I think it's just like shooters have to shoot. And I think if you tell them like how many shots like great players get up every day, like how many they actually do, just to like have a 40% or percentage from three at like a very high level, the hundreds and thousands of shots. I don't think a lot of players, and it sounds like you would agree with this, I don't think a lot of players at the high school level truly know how many shots they need to be getting up.
No. Yeah.
And I think we as coaches need to tell them and demonstrate that to them, like this is how many like you need to be getting up on your own. And if you do that, it'll correct itself, and it'll work itself out. But if you're only shooting like when I'm watching you shoot, of course it's going to be inconsistent.
Yeah,
At least that's the way I
absolutely.
feel about it. It's going to be inconsistent, but no, that's a good point though to what you meant about like think about like what are you doing in practice to get your shooters like game like shots? Because I'm sure you've seen players who can just like light it up from the gun or light it up stationary, right? But
Mhm.
like they need to be put in game situations.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you do a lot of like competitive stuff. Are you doing like a lot of like small sided games and things like that or that sort of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and we do try to and we could probably shoot more. Just get
I think every
more
coach says that.
shots up. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. But we do try to, if we're doing a shooting drill, we'll have somebody closing out on them. So then that's a two-part drill. You're working on your closeouts, but then you're also, for your shooters, getting them in the mind frame of, okay, I got to get my shot off, or I got to counter to the closeout if I can't get it off in time. So, um, yeah, we do try to make things a little bit more competitive.
I think that's also something to build on. If you have players who are like losing confidence in their shot, like if you can even just work on a little bit on just like, hey, but like you got to still be confident with your shot and still have your shot fake up and then get to the
Yeah,
basket or do
yeah,
things like that. Like, just find ways to still be active because especially if it's a shooter, my offense requires that like the girls who I need to shoot are going to shoot. Like they
yeah,
need to be respected as shooters, and so that they're getting good closeouts and spreading the defense out. Like if they know that you're not going to shoot anymore, we're in bigger trouble. So you
yeah,
need to be shooting, sort of
yeah,
thing. It's
exactly.
kind of like that idea of like you not shooting is like being selfish
Yeah,
because now like you're messing up everything we're trying to do here.
yeah,
And so because I think players might think like, oh, my shot isn't falling if I shoot, I'm hogging the ball or I'm shooting even though my shot is off. But it's like no, like you need to, otherwise we're
yeah.
in worse trouble, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trust your so we always said we had some really good rebounders. Like trust your rebounders to go get the ball then, like get it up on the backboard, get it up on the rim and let your rebounders go to work and get the putback or something.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so
Yeah. And I also just to kind of add, I do think that you also should think about without like getting too much advice, but like also like keep keep track of their misses and see if there's something that they're consistently always doing or they're consistently like always short or they're consistently always at a certain thing, like something very quick you could fix that might not be bad. But if you're trying to like
yeah.
reconstruct someone's whole entire shot, I've never had any success with that, and I would love to talk to somebody who did because that
Yeah.
seems very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And then also just kind of add a final part, like another thing too is just making sure that your guys and your girls like they're in shape, making sure that their like legs are still with them and that
Hmm.
they can always shoot because I think when the legs go, then the form gets really
Yeah.
really weird.
Yeah.
So making sure
Definitely.
that they get that going. All right. What was the worst season that you've been through as a coach, and how did you get through it and learn from it? Well, I'll start because fortunately for me it was years ago and it was middle school too, which was also nice. Um, yeah, I coached a middle school team. This is oh about 6 or 7 years ago, and we won one game, and just it was one of those things where you just were completely outmatched every single game that you played, and you just knew, right? Like you just
Mhm.
knew like we're gonna show up, and it's didn't have a ball handler, didn't really have anything, and every game was just except for one, and the only reason I think we won the one is because it was against the second worst team, and both of their like best players were out, and I think we won by like two or something. So we still got that one win. Yeah, that was tough. Just having players who just weren't basketball players and just weren't, really dedicated or putting in a lot of time and they got, their self-confidence down as many middle schoolers, as we know, aren't exactly high confidence people to begin with. Their confidence went down. And I think the only way I got through it is I just had to make practices like fun, and we just had to do fun things in practices, or we had to like compete in practice and play games against each other, so at least like we could see victories in practice and things like that. and I also think I had to just sort of let go. And once I started to like realize like, hey, like this is what it's going to be this year, and we'll work hard and we'll try hard, but like understanding that, you know, we're not gonna accomplish a whole lot on the court, and just kind of let it go and just enjoy being with them as people and just have fun at practice, still work hard, and just kind of take it for what it is. And that's very difficult for me to do, but I had to do it that year, because if I didn't, I nobody would have had a good experience. So I think that that would kind of also be my advice. Like if you're going for a really rough season, like just compete at practices, keep score at practices, have you know, have your guys or girls win in practice in whatever way that you define that, and at least they'll have that to go for, even if the win-loss record isn't that great. But that was mine. Coach, I think yours may have been a little bit more recent than mine, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really the last 3 seasons, they've been losing seasons. The season prior to this one, we won 6 games. This year I pretty much go into every game. I mean, you know, we'll be on a losing streak and I go into every game thinking that we can win. Like that's just,
Yeah, sure.
My high school coach was like that. And it just kind of instilled that in me as a player and as a coach. But yeah, this year we only won 4 games. You know, it just really sucks for the girls. You know, because, you know, as a coach, every loss, you know, you take every loss. You know, and people can be like, oh, well, you don't have the players. I'm like, yeah, but still, like that's not an excuse to me for whatever reason.
No, yeah, sure.
But like, you know, it just sucks for the girls to work hard every day. And shockingly, our morale, you know, aside from a couple things, you know, that you find out later after the season's over, like, well, the locker room was kind of, you know, like some girls didn't like each other and blah, 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 you know. But for the most part, like they came every day, you know, and worked their butts off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it really just sucks for them that, you know, we weren't really ever able to get over the hump. You know, and you pick up a win and you're like, yes, now we're good now. Like we got it. And
Right.
then, you know, like the next game it was always kind of like we go like 10 steps forward, or like 3 steps forward and then 10 steps back. So we could never really get into the flow. But I think every day or every game we were able to kind of take something from it and learn. And then, you know, even now as you look back and you prepare for, you know, the summer stuff, and then even, you know, as you think about this incoming season, you kind of think about, okay, well, maybe we need to revisit, you know, our practice plans, or, you know, you don't want to totally question everything that you did. But you do kind of go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, maybe we need to put in a different offense, or I don't know, just, I think you have to go back and be able to learn something from it, take something from each game or practice or whatever, you know, just to get better as a coach. But then also, you know, when you have your exit meetings in the spring with your returning players, it's like, okay, well, this is what happened this year. This is what we're kind of thinking for this year as far as expectations and such. So
And it's even at the worst season that you have, it's not like your players got worse being with you. It's not like they didn't get anything out of this. And you know, it's kind of a tough lesson to learn, but I think it's an important one, right? You can work really hard, but like not necessarily get the result that you want. But I don't think that diminishes the work that you did, or the importance of like doing that hard work. Like you may work really hard and not get like a result that you want, but if you're always working hard at like different aspects of your life, like you will get rewarded one way or the other. And I think that, you know, if your players can even take that out of it, like that's good. Like if they can get like that sort of thing out of it. And I think that like kind of to your point, like if your culture is good and you're good at, and you have like you're really good at having a good energy, and your players like being around each other, and they work really hard, and they have good sportsmanship and they try their best, like that season becomes a lot easier to deal with, I think, when
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah.
Because I know that, there's been coaches whose worst season has been like when they went to the state championship game and but all their players like hated each other and everyone like was mad at each other and like
Yeah.
all this drama or whatever. And it looks great on paper, but like it's just a miserable experience, right? So
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I think too, like when you said, you kind of changed up the practices, did some more fun stuff or whatever, that's kind of what we would try to do like every once in a while. Like one of our moms teaches yoga. So, we'd bring her in a couple days
nice.
just to kind of change it up. And the girls loved it. But just to change it up, or maybe I think one practice over Christmas break, I don't think it was this year. We might have done it this year too. We played kickball at the end of practice or something just to do something fun, when it just kind of, just really just kind of sucks,
Hmm.
So just to laugh and smile again. I mean, and they were, but it's just like, oh, just kind of sucks. So we would, throw out, volleyball or, just do something totally random when it's not even basketball, just to let them have a little bit of fun for a
Yeah.
little bit. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a lot of fun. I also
Yeah.
think court wise too, like on the court, if you got a good culture and you got players who are working hard and, doing things the right way, because I'm such a defensive guy, like speed up the game. Like that's more fun. Just
Mhm.
go press, go run, go just be sprinting, running up and down the court all the time. Because I think
Yeah.
there, to me, watching teams that really struggle and then also watching them play like a slow, methodical, like half court game is agonizing.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna have guys who have a good work ethic and you just focus on defense, get them in on their press or get them in on, your run and jump, just put that in and then
Yeah.
just speed up the game and even if the score isn't that great, like you're going to make that other team work and I think your players are just going to have more fun playing that way and I
Mhm.
think that helps too because whew, the slow half court just
Oh, yeah.
methodical and
Yeah.
then it's also you're completely outmatched too, like if you're
Yeah.
outmatched
True.
you probably should not be trying to play in the half court too often anyway. You should
Yeah.
probably try to be making it messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, have you ever got a technical? Also, how do you keep your composure on the sidelines when a referee is clearly wrong? Have you ever been teed up before, coach? Has that ever happened?
Yeah.
Ooh.
I've only had two technicals. My first one really was only because I felt like I felt like somebody was going to get hurt in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like this one girl, so my point guard last year, she was 5'6" on a good day, maybe 115 pounds soaking wet, just a tiny little guard. And the other team's post player just came up from behind her and just shoved her. And this girl, she's probably 6'2", like she was a big girl. So I did kind of lose my mind because, I felt like my player was unsafe. It was not a good environment. Um, this year, I don't really understand how I got the technical. Really, truly, everybody was kind
Uh,
of like, what? But
uh,
I was asking a different referee what the call was. And really when I disagree with a referee, I really don't yell a ton. I will just ask like can you please explain to me how you made that call? Like help me understand what you saw because I saw something totally different. And sometimes the ref will be like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like I just totally blew that. Um, but really, I really don't try to get into the referees because at the end of the day, it's not their fault, for the most part.
mm-hmm.
Some of them are like really bad. I'll be like, please don't bring them back.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, most of the time it's just asking for clarification on why they made the call or what they saw to make that call. But for us, we only won 4 games, and a lot of times the losses, I mean, we were in a lot of games, but it's also kind of hard to argue calls when you're down 15, 20
Mm-hmm,
points,
mm-hmm.
so
Yeah,
so
that's true. Uh, I have not. I've never gotten a
really.
technical. No,
Okay.
no, no.
Good for you.
This year would have been the closest. This year, I really had to like do the knuckle bite and
Yeah.
really have to like dig in because the ref we were we had committed an offensive foul, and then the other team shot free throws because they were in the bonus, and
Mhm.
I'm like, no. An
Yeah.
offensive foul. Like I tried like three times, and uh,
Yeah.
I was even now I'm just like, oh, and that happened twice. One in a game I was coaching, one at a freshman game on our team on our
Really?
level too. And I just I almost want to like just have the rule book out, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
hello, like hello. I it's hard, and I think if you want to have that conversation. It's kind of like you said, like you want to ask for clarification, but then you get like refs too, or like if you ask, like they'll tee you up for that too, for even
Yeah.
like asking
Yeah.
them
No
too.
doubt. Yeah.
And I honestly like for me, that's kind of my thing is like I'll try and talk to a ref at like halftime or if I can or when there's a break if I have a question about something. Um, but it's almost like you said, like it's almost a situation for me where it's just like I'd just rather request that I don't have them if I
Yeah.
can't. Like that's as good as I can do.
Yeah.
Um, I I get the referees' names every time they introduce themselves, and I write them on my whiteboard. And so I'll call them out by their name and ask them stuff like
Yeah.
Steve, what was that? Like what are we doing? Come on, Steve.
Yeah.
Um, how do I keep my composure? I guess for me, I hate attention. I really don't like attention on me of like any sort, and I know that if I start getting into it with refs, now all of a sudden the attention's on me, and I
Mhm.
don't like that at all. I think that it doesn't help my players because if my players see me like stressed out or annoyed, that's gonna freak them out. And so I
Yeah.
really have to do like the best I can because I just don't want to be in a situation where I'm frustrated at refs. And the other reason for that, and this is very hard, this is very hard for me to do sometimes, but I've also know that with some of the teams I've coached, if I get like upset with refs, my players now think they have like an excuse to also like be upset or to also like
Yeah.
have like reasons to be annoyed. And it can get them unfocused too, which I also don't want at all. But
Yep. Definitely.
it's it's hard.
Yep.
I think when I get really like stressed or really annoyed about a ref, I have to like purposefully like say something like really positive like to somebody on my team or somebody on the bench. Like I have to like rewire my brain so to speak. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's difficult too. The thing I always expect to get teed up for, and I know I will one day, is when um I'll say like to a player, like let's say they get a block, but it gets called as a foul. I'll tell her like, hey, like, keep doing that. That was a block. Don't worry about it. Like that wasn't a foul. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
mind saying that sort of thing.
Right. For sure.
Um, I don't know. I think it just comes down to your temperament, but I do sometimes worry about for coaches who really get into it with refs a lot. I think it kind of can become like this like sideshow, like kind
Yes.
of like
Agreed.
weird thing, and then technicals happen, and then the game slows down, and at the end
Just
of the
makes
day, I
it
think
like,
we are supposed to be kind of modeling like how to
yeah.
have healthy adult to adult interactions too.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but it's like you really do have to be like mindfully aware of yourself when you're getting frustrated and like
Yeah.
have something to like divert your attention.
Yeah.
But
And then I
it is
love
tricky.
playing those coaches that get crazy because then I just try to, you know, butter up the refs, when, if the other opposing team is just on them constantly, the coach is just on them. And you coach against people like that. So I'm
Mhm.
always just like extra nice to the referees because I just know this opposing coach is just going to be all over them. So I'm always just like doing a good job, like they run by just because, like if I'm nice, they're going to give me calls, not the jackwad next, down there. So yeah, so that's always something to think about too.
Uh,
Like,
Yeah, and where I'm at, I don't know if it's the same thing for you. Like I see the same refs all the time, and then you get
Yeah.
to know them and
Yes.
get to know them really well, and it's it's pretty nice when you like them and they like you. It's you always wonder maybe that 50-50 call is gonna go my way
Yeah,
because
absolutely,
we're
for
treating
sure.
each other well, sort of thing.
Yeah.
All right, last question. On the spot, you got to draw up a game winning baseline out of bounds play for a two. What kind of action or what is it you're gonna draw up, coach? What do you like to get on a baseline out of bounds play?
So is it on our end or are we going the other way? So,
I'll say you have the ball into the basket.
okay. So I mean, not always. We really weren't in a ton of these situations. But I kind of like to have a play where there's multiple options just because you don't want it to go to one person or have one option and then it's kind of like dead. But I like to kind of set like you have your person's out of bounds. Okay, you've got your 4 and 5 at the elbow. You got your 2 on the block, like over top of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your 1. I guess they could be on the opposite block as well. But your shooter, your 2, that's who everybody thinks the ball is gonna go to. So sometimes I'll like to send them up through like an elevator action to the top of the key just as a decoy. And then, those defenders are typically fighting through that um, elevator screen or, trying to cover. And then you slip your 4 or your 5 to the basket, straight down. We've scored on that a couple times just as not needing it for anything. But just, everybody's kind of focused on that too. Like, oh, elevator, elevator, elevator.
Yeah.
And then you slip that person to the basket and it's wide open.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, especially when you have a situation where like the defense thinks the ball's always going to go one place,
Yeah.
but it's like not designed for them at all. They're just
Yes.
complete like decoy stuff, and it's
Yeah.
like whoop, oopsies. No,
Yeah.
that's cool. I like that. I'm gonna maybe have to steal that or look into that. I love like stealing baseline out of bounds or
Oh
sideline out of
yeah.
bounds stuff. I'll take anything.
Absolutely.
Um,
Like you're playing in a game. Like I'll be like, oh my gosh, draw that up. Draw that up, remember that, or even rewatching a game film, you're like, oh my gosh, they killed us on that. We need that. Like we're gonna
mhm,
steal that. So
mhm.
yeah, even coaches we play, steal their stuff.
Yeah, I like it's so fun too when you feel like you get a basket on something that it's almost like I don't know. It feels kind of like not like cheap, but it feels kind of like silly. Like we got a lot of points last year on just a real simple like box set where we had two guards at at the low block, and then we had our bigger girls on the elbow, and then the two girls they go down, they set a screen, so then the two big girls now are driving to the basket, and then depending on where the ball is, they'll set a cross screen,
Mm.
and like we'll just get like a lot just off of that. Or then the one guard who's now at the elbow can kick out, we get the ball to her, and then she can throw it inside and then just get like
Yeah.
an easy layup off that, and just like really like kind of like silly stuff like that that you can get a work in. And I know I've stolen two. This would be hard because I don't have a diagram necessarily to draw
Yeah.
this up. Don't have my clipboard, but I think this is like from like Fran Fischella or something, or against like a 2-3 where you have um a guy goes and he sets a screen on the guy underneath the basket in the 2-3, and then you have one player who runs out to the opposite three, but then you hold on that screen, and then there's another guy who basically goes and he curls off that screen, and he's just like
Mm.
wide open because
Yeah.
the other guy on the 2-3 goes and he goes with the shooter, and then
Yeah.
this other guy just kind of is just right there and just like curls it right to him. I've
Oh,
also done just really silly like stuff with like stack like straight up like fourth, fifth grade stuff where you have them in the stack set and you can like
yeah.
have your shooters go out, and then you have the one guy like dive to the basket, and then you have the guy at the end of that stack, he hesitates a second, and then he then dives in and you can kind of do like a tip play or something like that after. It's just so funny how like some of this stuff that you do in like 3rd or 4th grade, like you can
Yeah.
still get away with like your box or your lines.
Yes.
Or I'm sure you've seen where you have like the like the 4 guys or the 4 girls all in a line, and then the one like pops out because they're the shooter, and the other 3 are setting like a whole screen and a
Yeah.
wall for
Yeah.
him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just silly stuff like that. But if it works, like, hey, why not? You know, why
Exactly.
not, sort of thing. That is funny. Awesome. Well, Coach, we got a lot done here. This is
We
almost an
did.
hour of stuff here.
Yeah.
Very cool. So thank you guys for sending in those questions. Be on the lookout the next time we do one of these. We look forward to hearing from you guys and sending questions. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. I know it was a bit of a tough season this last year, but the best part is you get an off season in the summer and you get to get back at it next year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Those questions. I mean, the questions are always great. So it's always fun to talk basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep those questions coming. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another Q&A episode of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.